Hello there, welcome to Just the Discs. My name is Brian Sauer. I am joined today by a special guest and a good friend, Mr. Jonathan Hertzberg from Fun City Editions. Hello, sir. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Hello, everybody. Hello, Brian. Great to be back.
It's always a pleasure to have you, sir. People get excited to hear these conversations, and today we're talking about the latest Fun City release, which is a movie called Handgun, aka Deep in the Heart from 1983, and a really fascinating, impactful film. And I wanted to talk to you about like why this film and let's talk about why and then what it's about, I guess.
Sure. Why this film? I mean, as you know, one of our missions is to get films out there in upgraded versions that haven't been yet or haven't been in a while. And this film, had been available on DVD in the past, but this is the first time that it's been upgraded for, HD or better. And it fits the mold of films that have slipped through the cracks, the mold for us anyway, of films that have kind of, I don't know, been forgotten, but just have been a little bit harder to see and may not have gotten their due. And I think this is one of those films.
Definitely, yeah. And there's some great stuff in the extras about why this film maybe didn't connect or didn't get its due in terms of a theatrical release.
Mhm.
We can get into that later. But so Handgun, I'm watching this movie for the first time, and I trust obviously in your curation of these films, and I always appreciate when you bring this kind of thing to the label.
Yeah.
And I think this is a fascinating one. I know you and I sort of briefly touched off mic about how it does get categorized as sort of a rape revenge type movie, but I think that is a bit I want to say misleading because that is certainly part of what it is. But the movie I think is really fascinating because it takes the story of a young Boston teacher who is now a new Texas transplant. She moves to Dallas to teach, and she meets this guy at um, a sort of a barbecue, and he's immediately talking about guns, big red flag. And then she goes out with him a few more times, and they end up having on the third date an interaction that turns into a rape, actually. And so it's very intense in that sense, but it really takes a long time to build things up, and it goes away from the sort of rapist in the alley kind of exploitative approach to this kind of story and these kind of characters. And I think it's just very different in that sense. And I would imagine that's part of why you would pick a movie like this, outside of the fact, as you said, that it's really not gotten its due on home video.
Yeah, it definitely, like you say, it doesn't go in that direction of a lot of exploitation films. It's the filmmaker comes from a documentary background, and so I think he's aiming for something a little more a little more real,
Yeah.
docu-realism.
Yeah, definitely in the filmmaking. And then as you mentioned, he's British. His name's Tony Garnett, and he works, I think you said, in television in the 60s and politically minded, and worked with Ken Loach. I know he adapted Kess and worked with Loach as a producer on several other films. And
Yeah. Yeah,
obviously,
they kind of came up or came of age in the industry together and sort of were both kind of politicized around the same time in the 60s, both very much concerned with working class the working class rights and concerns, and the upper classes exploiting the lower classes, and
yeah,
that informs a lot of the films that they made, the films and the television dramas that they made in the UK. And when this movie was made, it was after they had, I guess, split professionally. I know they remained very close friends, but Tony went to the U.S. to sort of to try to make it in Hollywood. And this was a film that was developed, as I understand it, with seed money or development money from the Lad Company. which is a
Very interesting.
great, yeah, you know, there's a lot of films we both know and love that came out under the auspices of the Lad Company. So,
Yeah, and he gets mentioned in Alan Ladd Sr. gets mentioned in the film, interestingly, which is I don't know that those things are connected
oh,
necessarily.
you're right. Yeah, that's right. That's right. I forgot about that. Yes, yes, because she has the conversation where oh, it's where she's talking with Larry,
The lawyer that she meets,
the
yeah.
mansplaining gun nut rapist,
Yes, yes.
and he's talking about John Wayne and how all the actors now are, you know, not, you know, real men, so to speak. And
Yeah,
she
and I
says, well,
love that she
I kind of like Shane and
Yeah, yeah. I love that she
Alan Ladd.
identifies with Alan Ladd, and there's actually a reference to Jack Palance later that I kind of like that's in a
Hmm.
more intense moment in the movie. Um but yeah, it's a really interesting movie in that it sets him up as creepy right away, but she's like sort of a naive type and doesn't quite understand not only what she's getting herself involved with by continually agreeing to go out with him, but also this outsider approach. And
She
this is
doesn't want to offend him, you know.
no,
I think
exactly.
she's
She's trying to
trying
be
to fit
sweet,
in.
trying to be a nice person. And yeah, the neat thing about the movie is I didn't know it was a British movie when I'm watching it, but then when I went back with the commentary and some other things, like a lot more becomes clear about an
Mhm.
outsider, a British guy in particular, observing the gun culture in this country and observing the process by which a woman has to go through when she wants to report and prosecute or try to prosecute for a rape and how
Mhm.
difficult and trying that is. But I really do love the approach, and I think that really makes this film so unique. You could say it's another side of like Death Wish or even Miss 45, but it's so grounded in like that realism that you're talking about that I think it really hits very hard. And the main actor is um Karen Young.
Karen Young.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and she this is her debut film, I believe.
This is her first, as far as I know, her first time acting on film, you know, like
Wow.
acting for the camera. So I think she was a New York based actor, stage actor, and she answered an ad in one of the trades for this film. They wanted somebody that kind of had a Irish type and had to be willing to cut her hair.
Yeah.
So
Which is a significant point in the movie that she does
yeah.
that after the rape, and sort of the general idea is that she um joins Larry's gun club and starts becoming quite a marksman and going towards a potential revenge solution that I won't get into in the movie, but that's sort of the idea of it. And I think she's just fantastic in the movie. I recognized her from Burt Reynolds' film Heat.
Yeah.
But she was also in Jaws the Revenge, 9.5 Weeks, Birdie, Daylight.
A lot of people are going to recognize her from The Sopranos. She
Oh,
plays,
there you go.
yeah, that's she plays an FBI agent and she has a integral role in that series. So
Yeah,
yeah,
she's great though, and it's interesting. The director, I think, had said something to her about, this is not the kind of movie where Burt Reynolds is going to come in and save the day, and that's exactly what happens in Heat, like three years later.
and there's
But
also a Burt Reynolds reference at the beginning when her friend says something like Burt Reynolds is going to be at the party or, you know, at the barbecue.
yeah, that's
It's like one of the opening lines of the movie.
yeah,
So
it's a really interesting movie though. Like you say, like I get why there's a hesitancy to classify it with other rape revenge that that
also, it's
are
just such a loaded word, you
it
know.
is.
It's just for a lot of people is going to immediately put them off the film.
Yeah, I think it
And
is.
and we do have to say that that the assault scene is very upsetting. It's very it's difficult to watch. It's not I don't think it's exploitative. It doesn't there is a fade to black, so there's stuff that you don't see.
Yeah.
But the things that you do see in the words, just the way this guy justifies what he does is like it's chilling
Yeah.
and and it's very upsetting.
Yeah,
And
and even
it's meant to be.
absolutely. And I think that was a problem for some folks who went to see the film that maybe were looking for that kind of a titillation that you might get from a certain kind of exploitation movie that falls into this category. And
Possibly.
it's not that. And I love that about it. But I also love her, and the guy who plays Larry, reminds me alarmingly of Jameson Parker from Simon and Simon.
Yes, yes, yeah. Oh, totally. He's got the look. Yeah, he's totally that. He is that type. His name is Clayton Day,
Yeah.
and it was
He's
also his first film. And I don't think he acted really in anything else.
wow.
He's really good.
Yeah, he
He's
is. And
really, and the thing that's interesting about his character, I think that makes him a little bit different is that, like you were said before about like the back alley rapist or something, like this guy's like he's a lawyer, he is an upstanding, he's an he's educated, he's wealthy, he's respected in the community. So which is probably closer in a lot of ways to reality than the guys that are out of a Death Wish movie.
absolutely. No,
It's,
absolutely. And the fact that she, like I said, continues to see him,
but
not
that's why she
realizing.
continues to see him, because she's trying to be nice to this guy, and he's not an obvious. I mean, we watched the movie and you're like, this guy's. I mean, there's red flags from the beginning, and he
Yeah,
gets worse and worse, and I mean, he's an asshole, but he's not like, again, he's a lawyer, like he's a guy that knows she meets him through her friend, so this. And so that the assault that happens is actually a date rape,
yes.
because
And
they
he
know each other, and this was like an early, that was kind of like probably at the beginning of when that became a term, even.
absolutely, yeah. And it is so tough to watch, but so I think well handled by Garnett in terms of like showing us what we need to see to understand the trauma and the significance of the action, but not getting into, like you said, there's a fade to black, which normally this film wouldn't necessarily do. He's just so involved with this character, this Kathleen character, and what she's going through, and so sympathetic to everything about it. But it is an interesting turn when she is traumatized yet again, when she has to go through the reporting process, and then finally decides to sort of take things into her own hands, cut her hair, and start taking up with the guns and stuff. And I do love how the film resolves. I think it's a very powerful ending, and yeah, she just does such a great job with it. It's just one of those movies that I wasn't sure by either title, Deep in the Heart or Handgun, exactly what I was in for.
Mhm.
And I think it's a movie that is significant, like I said, in that it's not what you think it is. Even us describing it, I feel like you're right. It's
Yeah,
going to be something that might put people off. And I'm just saying this is a movie that's different than that, and is something that needs to be viewed, and I think is incredibly relevant today. There's some conversations about firearms,
mhm.
and people needing them. There's one particular guy at the gun range that's talking about how we're going to need guns, and I'm just like watching this now
Yeah.
in the society that we live in and the horrors that we become used to, and kind of like, wow, this is, you know, 20
Lots has not
like
lot
40 years
a lot has not changed in that
40
time.
years ago, and it's still the same, actually worse. So yeah, it's got a lot of stuff in terms of that, and I really was moved by it. I really was moved by the film and the
I'm
performances.
glad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean it, and the reason why it was called Deep in the Heart when it came to America was because it was felt that they wanted an audience that wasn't the audience that would typically go see like a Death Wish movie. They wanted an audience. They felt the movie was, obviously was different than that, and they felt that they were going to lose some of that target audience with a title like Handgun. And so that was the reason why they felt that Deep in the Heart might appeal more to what they felt was the target audience for the film at
Yeah,
the
it's
time.
a good title, and a title that I didn't even fully get until I was listening to the commentaries and heard Chris O'Neill mention like Deep in the Heart of Texas. That
Right,
should
right.
have been obvious from the
Yeah.
outset, but I
Well,
was
that's
just
what
like,
we kind of made it pretty obvious on if you hold up the slipcover.
yeah,
It says on the Deep in the Heart
it's got
side,
the Texas right
it's
there.
got the
So
Texas flag there.
so
So
it's pretty clear.
just so it really hammer it home.
Yeah, it's a great
But I
title in
like
that
that.
sense.
I got it right away, and I liked it because it's such a Texas movie. And that's something Texas is like, it's probably the most of any state we have uh, the most kind of I mean, there are a lot of others. There are other states that have that state pride that wave their flag, but I feel like Texas more than any other state has that culture of like being, a little bit separate, being a
Yeah.
distinct. I mean, it's also it's because it's so huge too. I mean, Texas is probably larger than some European countries. Uh,
Yeah.
but and I think that was something that Tony Garnett was drawn to, was that within America, Texas is its own thing. Like Texas has this culture and a mystique and a mythology that's its own, and
Yeah.
that's something that obviously that the Larry character really speaks to very pridefully,
Yeah.
where he's talking about how um, the cult 45 is like basically the hero in the whole story of the taming of the West.
Yeah. And we haven't even mentioned, like, he's got quite an arsenal at his, obviously he's a gun fanatic, but he has quite an
Right,
arsenal at his house. When I was watching him, I was thinking this guy and the Stuart Margolin character in Death Wish would get along, I think.
right, right.
Although
I
that
mean, the
guy
thing is,
seems,
this guy's different because he's because of the fact that he's a lawyer and he's educated, and he, like you said, he looks like Jameson Parker and he sounds like Jameson Parker, like he's polished.
yeah,
He's not he's a he's not like some of the other characters that you see later sort of more fit the bill of the conspiracy theory, the guy, like they're like proto QAnon guys. But this guy, the villain of the piece, Larry, he doesn't really fit into those. He has those beliefs, but he masks them in under this, more acceptable facade.
civilized. Yeah, it's almost
Yes,
like a
and
civilized.
he's high. He's high. He's a lawyer. I
Yeah,
mean, he's white collar.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, he's pretty interesting in that sense, and the unfortunate side is the movie really sets up well certain points where you feel like he might, from his point of view, think that she's into him, because she sees him multiple times, because she kisses him, because she does things that, I don't think are necessarily saying anything he's doing is okay, but from the movie just showing it, you're just like, oh no, he's gonna start to think. And then, like there's some scenes where like even her friend is talking to him afterwards and saying, "Did something happen?" And he's just like, "Not as far as I know." I'm just like, you're just like losing your mind watching it. And
oh well,
but
he knows he's lying.
yeah, yeah,
Because I
yeah,
think he knows from the start she's going to be. He looks at her as like as his next. It's his next conquest. She's his
yeah,
next conquest. I
yeah,
think. I think it's like the way he's got everything set up when she's in his house. You realize that he's done this before.
yeah,
He
absolutely.
had to have done it before.
Yeah, it's super creepy in that sense. And yeah, like I said, just stands out in a way that's different from any of the films that came in the wake of Death Wish. And like I said, very important in that way. There's some really interesting observations in both the commentary, which you have a nice commentary here. It's a combination of Fun City regular Chris O'Neill and a newcomer to the label, Erica Schultz, who does has a book coming out called The Sweetest Taboo, and who does the Unsung Horrors podcast. And she's a Texas native. And so it's really neat because Chris sort of handles some of the British side of things, talking about Tony Garnett's history and the
Yeah.
Ken Loach stuff and
Right.
other details as well. And then, Erica comes in and she brings a lot of references to other films and just a general
Right.
idea of Texas as a
Right.
place, her background. And so that's a
Right.
really cool thing to have them in
Yeah.
combination on that track.
I always like to have commentators, contributors on these discs, especially when there's such a strong sense of place like this movie. I just feel like it's great that we have somebody who can speak more directly and personally to the Texas aspect of it, because it's such an important part of the movie. But it's also a very important part of the movie that the filmmaker is British.
Yep.
And, and the movie was made by EMI, British company. So, and it fits into the tradition of films made about America by people not from America.
Yep. Yeah, and
And
it's too bad because there's one of the things that I think sort of if I'm remembering correctly, that comes out in the track. I think Chris O'Neill brings this up, is that Warner Brothers secures the rights in the States. They want a change of title, I think, something like that. But then, if I understand it correctly, one of the things about the film was that it was very similar in some sense to Sudden Impact, which
Well, it
is
wasn't real. It's not really
no,
similar
I
to it.
know.
It's just that it's in the it's just a movie that's it's a rape revenge thriller in that very broad sense. But otherwise,
Well, I thought that my understanding was that the Warner Brothers saw it as maybe something that they could then release quietly after Sudden Impact, because that movie has sort of a woman gets a gun and goes after some guys,
right, right.
and
I think it was like more like it was kind of like how studios in the past they might remake a property, they might remake a film like something like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde comes to mind. When MGM did the early 40s version with Spencer Tracy, they bought up the early 30s one with Frederick March, and then they kind of suppressed it. And that's what they would, you get rid of the other film out there that might possibly detract from whatever the bigger thing, in
yeah,
this the bigger fish for you, which in this
exactly,
case, yeah, was the new Dirty Harry movie.
yeah, which
So
is
they got
it's a bummer because like they obviously didn't put a big push behind the movie. As I understand, it got a very small
it
theatrical
barely
release.
came out.
Yeah,
Like the advertisement that if you pull up the booklet, do you have it in front of you?
yeah. I
Yeah,
should mention,
pull it up.
yeah,
Because if you look at the back cover of the booklet, show that. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, Deep in the Heart. So that is the original advertisement that appeared in the New York Times because it did have a run in New York in early 1984 under that title and with
mm-hmm.
that campaign. But it only exists. We kind of like did a recreation or restoration of that ad because it was only like a black and white newspaper ad. And as far as I know, it didn't really play any other markets or too many other markets like commercially, like with a run. It played at some other festivals. I think it played in like LA and San Francisco, but like more as part of a festival kind of thing. Yeah, it really did not get a much of a release at all by Warner Brothers. It did come out on video here, and that's where a lot of people know it from. And we recreated that artwork as well on our on the wrap there, the Deep in the Heart artwork from the Thorn EMI cassette releases
And I
on
love the take
VHS
on the
later.
Thorn EMI logo there. That's very nice.
Yeah, yeah, it's
Well, I
too
remember
low
you
hanging
and
fruit.
well, it's great, but I remember you and I talking about Thorn EMI way back, uh, because they put out Bad Boys on
That's right.
VHS,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and we talked about the fact that I can't remember if it was Thorn EMI that did it or was it somebody else that
It
was
was Thorn
using
EMI. Yeah, when
what?
they released the tape and it was like it was the shorter version of the film.
Yeah, they wanted to use a 90-minute tape, and so they cut the film down or something like that.
I don't know if that's why, but I mean,
I
no, it
can't
was like
remember.
a cut. I think it was like a cut. I think they used like a cut, just like an international cut of the film that was a little shorter.
Gotcha.
It was like 20 minutes shorter.
But I think Thorn AMI came to my attention because of you and because of Bad Boys, which was a big film for both of us.
But yeah,
So it's interesting that this is a Thorn DMI release.
yeah,
But yeah, I should mention the booklet, really great, has a wonderful essay from Alexandra Heller Nicholas, who
mm,
literally wrote the book on rape revenge. She has Rape Revenge, a critical study, one of her big
right,
significant texts,
right,
and is
right.
a great person to obviously choose, very, very carefully chosen for this essay, and she does a great job with it as well.
Yeah, yeah. So it certainly is in her wheelhouse, and yeah, I think she was quite familiar with this film before writing the essay for us because of, like you said, because of the all the other work she's done on the genre
Yeah.
category.
And if you take her recommendations, which I definitely do, she's a big fan of this film and finds it to be a really significant entry in this kind of movie. But her essay is very thorough and very thoughtful. So really good stuff. Yeah, it's a great release, and I got to say congrats on another hidden gem, if you will. You know, a movie that just for whatever reason, just talking about the studio politics involved in this
Yeah,
one and the fact that it just didn't find its way, it really does seem to fit, like you say, with the mission statement of Fun City, which is to
yeah.
pull those gems out, you know?
And I have to say that this is a kind of a fun story about this release in particular is so, as we said, British film made in America is now owned by Studio Canal, which is a French company. And obviously they have a huge catalog. and they're kind of like the successor to Thorn DMI. So they have most of that catalog. But because of that, because the film has kind of gone through several different hands and been, several different owners, as is a lot of times the case, the elements, the pre-print elements were difficult to find, and the studio canal did not have a beat on the where the original camera negative was. And Fun City friend and friend of the label and sometime frequent collaborator, Mark Hoyk, was doing research for us at the Academy Film Archive in LA. And so he was looking for, like, we were trying to see if we could find a better, higher quality version of that, deep in the heart artwork, for instance. We were
Yeah.
trying to find if there were some better quality versions of the Warner Brothers marketing materials, of which there were not. Just the stuff on microfilm, and so we just had photocopies of that. But he was looking through the catalog, and Mark found that the original camera negative for this film was held at the Academy Film Archive. We don't know who deposited it there, but there you go. That's how we were able to
Wow.
do the restoration. So this Blu-ray is a new 4K restoration from the original camera negative, which up until we did this release, it wasn't lost per se, but the company that owns the movie did not know where it was, the negative.
Wow.
So
Nice. And looks
that's how we
fantastic, by the way. It
that's how
looks
we
really,
got
really
it.
good.
So got to give a big shout out to the Hoyk.
Very cool. Very cool that Mark was involved. Yeah, not surprising. He's quite the detective when it comes to this kind of stuff. But yeah,
Yeah.
as a result, the release is that much better. The transfer is wonderful. And it was neat for me to see it. I mean, I would have loved to have seen it on VHS back in the day, but
Mm,
seeing it this way,
yeah.
it just looks stellar. So that's really cool news that you're able to
Yeah,
find
it
that.
does look really good.
But yeah, another great release, man. I gotta say, I really enjoyed the
Thank
film,
you.
and like I said, it's one that I hope a lot of people will seek out and discover,
Yeah.
and because it's like Fun City has done before. It's a movie that I think a lot of people don't know, despite the fact that it did have
Yeah.
a following on
Well,
VHS.
it's another example of it's like so many of the films we've released, and you've already touched on it, in that it's got some genre elements. You could put it in a category. You can call it a rape revenge drama or a rape revenge thriller. But like so many of the films that we've released, it's like partially that thing, partially that exploitation thing or genre thing, and then it's also other things that kind of muddy those waters, and so it sort of sits in between. And that's probably why it had such a hard, I mean, that is why it had such a hard time finding an audience when it came out originally, and why it had two different titles and all the different campaigns you see there.
Yeah,
You can see how many different ways they tried to sell this movie, not all very honestly.
no,
um, but I mean, that's show business, that's salesmanship.
yeah,
So
no. But
you
this
have it
isn't.
all on our packaging. You can see it all pretty
And I love that you do that. I love that you I know you well, and I know that you are a man who enjoys looking at marketing materials and digging up old press kits and things like that and making them a part of your packages when you can. And I think that is yet another thing that sort of sets Fun City apart from other labels that don't have somebody behind them with the kind of enjoyment you get out of that stuff that I know that makes it a
Oh,
better
yeah,
release.
it is a lot of fun, because I love it's part of the history of the film, and
Yeah.
how it was marketed, how it was sold or attempted to be marketed and sold is an important part of the history. And it's especially a movie like this, a movie that's, like I said, is not an easy sell. There's just a lot happening there on the surface and under the surface. And so there's like no way you're gonna disappoint some segment of the potential audiences for the movie.
Yeah.
But hopefully, with everything we offer in terms of the context, in terms of like all the great people that we have on the supplements, really kind of like giving you that history. It's really important with a film like this, I think. So
Absolutely. Context is so important with this kind of a movie and this one in particular. And I think you did a great job, like with getting the right people to be involved in it. I do love there's even just a short archival interview with Tony Garnett himself,
Mm,
where he tells a story of coming to the United States for the first time, being in Los Angeles and at a coffee shop, I think, and sitting down to have some coffee and having two police officers come in and sit down next to him,
mm, mm,
fully armed. And as a Brit, he was quite alarmed by that. And I think
mm.
that is either already part of the process of this movie or was just something that sort of reinforced some ideas about America and our approach. Because apparently at the time of at least of that interview, British police officers were not armed.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's right. That's right.
so, and that's
That's
a
what he.
significant detail I think a lot of Americans don't consider is, some police forces
No, because
don't.
you think about it, if it was the other way around, if you were an American and
Yeah.
you were sitting down in a pub in England and and a police officer sat next to you and you back then especially and they weren't armed, you'd be like, what kind of what kind of police are these? Like
Exactly.
how are they gonna be Crime Stoppers, you know?
Yeah, I think that story really informs a lot of this movie. And whether it was a significant influence or not, just the idea of his perspective and how shocking that is for somebody from outside this country and how used to guns we've become, and
Mm-hmm.
how kind of sad and disturbing that is in its own way. But yeah, so much powerful stuff in this movie and just a really wonderful Fun City release. So I really thank you for coming on to talk
Oh,
about it, sir.
thank you, Brian. I'm glad you got so much out of it.
Oh, absolutely. Like I said, it's one of the better releases I've seen this year and just a really significant film that I think more people have to check out, Very, very solid stuff. So
Thank you.
thanks again, sir. All right, everybody, check out funcityeditions.com to order your copy today. And you can also pre-order the Seeing Red 3 French Vigilante Thrillers limited edition set, which is your next release, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, that will street on May 7th.
Very
So,
nice. Well, I hope to have you back to talk about that one because that
love
looks
to.
really, really interesting. Again, three films I've never heard of
Yeah.
and movies that I really want to check out. So,
Yeah, there'll be
uh,
certainly some overlap with what we've talked about today,
yeah.
I
Okay.
think as
Interesting.
well. Yeah.
Very interesting. Very cool. I love these kind of connectivity things that you do between these releases, and this next group looks really exciting. Thanks again, sir. We'll talk to you very soon.
Sounds great. See you then.
Okay. Okay.